One of the things that I want to say as I get started here, the term capital campaign is something that I really dis- I have. I don't know if disdain is too strong of a word, but it's pretty close. I don't like the word capital campaign, but it's an umbrella to really explain kind of what we do and kind of jump into the conversation quickly. And I'll talk a little bit about how you need to recapture what that expression, what that moniker of capital campaign is, because a lot of people are coming at you with a whole myriad of definition and history behind capital campaigns that they've experienced in other places. And so I don't like that word very much, but it helps us get fast tracked into the conversation. About 10 years ago, actually it's 10 years ago this week, I ended my term as an executive pastor. And we had come through a season where we had done our second capital campaign at that church, and we relocated to 42 acres. We had our new construction was underway, and in some ways I kind of felt like it was done, and I was like, well, I really like that. Is that a thing? Can you do that? Like, can I go do that? And 10 years ago this week is when that all started for me. And so for the past decade, I've been helping churches kind of navigate these waters of capital campaigns. And how do we do this? How do we talk about generosity and propel our vision forward? And what do we do there? I want to add, I want to just say ditto to like everything that Alan said this morning, because it is so important. In many ways, as a leader of disciples, you are going to find challenges in places of taking them to places you have not been. I can speak specifically to the area of generosity. It is going to be very hard for you to take people into deep generosity if you have not done it yourself. If you are not living there, it is going to be really, really hard for you to take other people there. And so if you go through this process of a capital campaign as a leader, you're going to be squeezed really hard very quickly, and we're going to find out how much you really believe about biblical generosity. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about some things that happened. There was a pastor I was working with in Wisconsin, and he called me in somewhat of a frantic nature, and he said, "Hey, Mark, I'm meeting with so-and-so tomorrow morning for coffee." He called me out of the blue. I don't really see him that much, but he called me, he wants to meet with me. I think it's about our capital campaign. And I said, "Okay, cool." And I'm like, "Well, what's up?" And he said, "Well, he's a billionaire." I said, "Billionaire? Like with a B, billionaire?" He said, "Yeah, he's a billionaire." And he's real like, his name is Dave, and Dave's like really like, he's really frantic about this. I said, "Well, tell me about this guy." I can't remember the individual's name. I said, "Well, tell me about him." He said, "Well, his wife and his daughters come, and they're in middle school. In fact, my daughters know them. And he's usually traveling a lot for business, does a lot of mergers and acquisitions. I think he's going to Munich and whatever." He listed all these different cities. And I said, "Dave, I think he's probably going to say something to the effect of, 'My teenage daughters are driving me nuts. I don't know what to do.'" He's not going to ask you about mergers and acquisitions in Munich. I mean, he's just not. He knows that. He needs what you know. He needs you to help him be a Christian dad. That's probably what he's going to talk to you about. And to Alan's point a little earlier, you bring something to these individuals that no one else does in their life. That's why they need you. That's why they need you to speak into their life. And you need to not behave like a millionaire or a billionaire, but you really need to know how they think. And you need to have great conversations with them. And one of the best ways to understand that is to have those conversations and listen. Ask great questions, listen. That's going to be a great thing for you to do that. Another church I was working with in Illinois was part of the Assemblies of God denomination, which is in the headquarters of the Assemblies of God denomination is in Springfield, Missouri, right? Is that right? Someone else affirmed that? And so we're having this conversation with the pastor, and he said, yeah, Sunday, a really weird conversation with one of our longtime members happened. And the pastor's name is Travis, and Travis was telling me the stories, and he's meeting with this member in the hallway, and the member, who's probably been there like 20 years, said to Travis, like, why are we doing this? And Travis goes into like full vision cast mode and is like, oh, we're going to do this, or we're going to give Bibles to children, and we're going to have a great new sanctuary, and it's going to give us the ability to do this in the community that we haven't been able to do for years. And he's in full-blown vision casting mode. It's like heartfelt passion. Here's where we're going. Here's what we're doing. And Travis is feeling really good about it. And the member, longtime member, said, no. Like, why are we paying for this? Why isn't Springfield paying for this? And Travis was so flabbergasted that this 20-year member of his church was like, I thought our denomination paid for these kinds of things. He didn't know. And how many of your people just don't really know like how all of that works in your church? Let's run through a couple of high-level questions here before we get into the meat of this, but I want you to kind of carry that with you for a little bit. Some of your people just don't know. And we can talk more about why people are perhaps unaware, but let's kind of enter in this a little bit. Why do churches enter into a capital campaign? A couple of reasons that are usually common. Money for a new building, debt retirement. If you're a church planter, kind of that first physical space, that's really a big thing, because you get tired of that setup tear down, and you want to have that ability. Multi-site expansion. Something for you to think about over the next 2 years. If you think about the next 24 months of ministry, what ministry will not have resources unless something changes? I want you to think about that for a second. What ministry that you aim to do will not be resourced unless something changes? Any takers? What will not have resources for ministry unless something changes about your financial picture? Anyone? No aspirations in this room? Yeah.
We'd like to have several serve centers around the city.
Serve centers. Like,
Community center designed to help in an area that is depressed and needs support, and it would do whatever that community needs.
that's amazing. We need to resource this. Somebody else. Unless something changes, what ministry will not get resourced? No dreamers? Church planting residents, okay? You've got ideas, I know you do. Maybe it's the 2:00 afternoon effect, and you've been listening all day. Unless something changes, you don't get to do those ministry impacts. You don't get to make a difference in your community. You don't get to raise up leaders, and that's part of what. And again, capital campaign, generosity initiative, leading people into a place of expanded ministry. Let's go ahead and go to the next one. What outcomes would define a successful campaign? In other words, if you were to define success in entering into that, like what would success look like? And typical responses are something like resources for the vision, excitement from the members, increase the number of givers. A lot of churches know when they have a first-time giver, but very few churches are tracking their lapsed givers, in the sense that they had a giving history and now there is no giving. And we could talk more about that offline, about how to identify lapsed givers and why it's important to see what trends are bringing to the forefront in understanding lapsed givers. But you should be understanding kind of where that back door is and identifying that. Helping dreams become a reality, new opportunities because of eliminated debt. We're doing a couple of capital campaigns this year that are debt elimination. It's not quite as easy to get people excited about eliminating debt, unless you're like this very unique church that I'm working with in Marion, Indiana. They are excited about eliminating debt. It's very, very odd. Yeah. Why do capital campaigns fail? Or why do capital campaigns fail to launch? I mean, we could do a whole nother thing about that. But why do capital campaigns fail? Loss of focus, a divided vision, goal was too big, anything that's not on the list that you know of, like other reasons you can think of. Why do capital campaigns fail? Did we miss anything in the list?
Vision changes in the midst of it. We're saying we're going to do this, and they say, well,
Oh, man.
I already gave money for this.
Yes. Fickleness. What's that?
Scope creep.
Scope creep. Okay. Yep.
Your scope just keep growing on you.
Yep. I sat down with a church that wanted to go into a capital campaign. They told me some of the things that they wanted to raise money for, and because of knowing the church very well, I was puzzled by what it was like a birthday wish list. It was like, well, if you're going to buy me something, buy this. And I just looked at him and really challenged. Is like, guys, this doesn't line up with, even your ministry goals of this year, let alone the vision that you've stated of where you're going. You can't go before your people with this. This is going to be like, it's going to create confusion. It's going to create an adverse reaction. So these are good. Fickleness and scope creep. Poor planning. Capital campaigns are really hard if you haven't addressed biblical generosity. If you haven't created a culture where people are understanding what being a biblical giver means, if you haven't uncovered that and gone through that, it's going to be harder. A couple of scriptures have come to mind today that just kind of being mindful of, like, the whole context of what Scripture brings to light about giving. In 1 Chronicles 29, David goes before the people, and he's bringing his gifts, and it lists everything that David is putting into the temple. And then in verse 5 of 1 Chronicles 29, David turns to everyone and says, now who is willing? Who is willing? It's this idea of, like, who's going to opt in? Who else is going to be a part of this? He's just bringing this invitation to everyone. In the church of Acts, someone in the room said, you know what, I have a need, and I don't know how to cover it. Someone else in the room says, I got you. And I just think that that's so powerful, that transparency that was happening in the book of Acts, where these guys were in such community that they said, I don't know how I'm going to do this. I have a financial need. And the other person right there says, I got it. I will take care of this. God loves a cheerful giver, said already today. I think you need to bring all of these things to light and not have a small picture of what giving is, because giving is not just to make sure that your church can continue to do things. Giving is about what God wants to do for the giver. The Old Testament says God owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. Here's how I take away from that. God already has all those things. God doesn't care about my $5 or my $50 or my $5,000 or my $5 million. God doesn't need what I bring from my wallet. What he needs and what he wants is what I bring from my heart. And you got to bring that to your people. And so a lot of why capital campaigns fail, in addition to these things, are just this idea of, like, are people really in tune with what biblical generosity means? Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. Here we go. So highlighted a little bit today already is this idea that a lot of your people are not giving to your church at a level of a tithe. And let's just make sure, when I say a tithe, I mean 10% of your income. When I say tithe, that's what I mean. So this box loosely represents what I have seen in church data over the last 10 years. Whether it's suburban Chicago, whether it's the cornfields of Illinois, whether it's Indianapolis, whether it's Dallas, Texas, or Irvine, California, this continues to play itself out over and over again. You've got about half of the people who say your church, that's my home church. About half of your people give squadouche to your church. Okay? There's all sorts of reasons why they don't give to your church. Part of it is, as Alan spoke to, toddlers. We haven't helped them grow up in their giving. Part of it is they don't know. Like the longtime member who said, "Why isn't Springfield paying for this?" Like, I don't even know how you like get to that assumption. I don't know. There's so many questions about that. Then you have a large group of folks who give less than $1,000, from $0 to $1,000 to your church. The average Starbucks Rewards member spends $27 to $28 a week at Starbucks. Okay, that's over $1,000. So I'm not saying that because people should give up their coffee, because I'm not giving up mine, but like that's coffee money. That's really what it is. That's coffee money. Between 1,000 and 5,000, that's cell phone bill money. They're paying more for their cell phone than they are investing in the local church. And then you have a very small band of folks who are giving over 10% of their income. Now the numbers get a little squishy. It's a little bit fuzzy math, and so that's why I just illustrated it and didn't put percentages beside it, because you don't know everybody's income. And so to know if they are actually tithing or not, well, that's up to them. But here's why I think this is important to understand for capital campaigns. If you ever say the words, "We want you to give above and beyond your tithe and offerings," guess who you've just told this is for? The smallest band of people in the box. Oh, it's for the people who are already tithing and giving. They are the ones who they're asking for more money. We default to language sometimes that I'm not sure we're truly unpacking. And I think you need to be aware of that. The other reason that this is important in a capital campaign is for the person who is giving at a high level already, sacrificially. They are lead givers. They are people who can set the pace in generosity and want to set the pace in generosity. If you have the same conversation with them as you do all the folks down here who are giving nothing, you're cheating someone in that conversation. And that's why you need to meet with the people that I call your pace setters. You need to meet with them separately. You need to have a different conversation with them than the folks who are giving nothing. And appropriate conversations with appropriate audiences along the way is really what a capital campaign is about. You need to be aware of that. Okay, let's keep going. 7 questions to answer before you start a capital campaign. What is the vision? Can you articulate the vision in a couple of sentences? Where are we going? What are we doing? What's the vision? If it takes you 12 minutes to answer that, you're not ready. You need to refine that. You need to bring that down to a few sentences that brings heart, passion, and clarity to what you're trying to accomplish. What is the vision? Second one, why does this vision matter? It's great to paint a compelling picture, but you've got to say why that picture matters. I was working with a church in Texas, everything bigger in Texas, right? The pastor of this church was like this 6'4" cowboy. He was the most handsome guy in the room. Like his charisma, was on the tip of his boots as he came in the room. That's what this guy was. He was just the energy around him was like compelling. And when he walked into the room, when he spoke, everybody leaned in, everybody was ready to go. And one time I spoke to him, I said, "Tyler, does anybody ever tell you no?" He said, "No, not usually." Because he was so compelling, so charismatic, people would follow him. And so as we go into this process, part of what the challenge for Tyler was he could get the audience stirred up, he could get them to say yes, but they weren't always 100% sure of what they were saying yes to. So we needed to bring that clarity in and help them understand, why does this vision matter? Third, why now? Like, what is the timing behind this? Why do we need to take these steps now? I was working with a pastor who was convinced they needed to eliminate debt, and they needed to eliminate it as soon as possible. I won't go into all the reasons as to why it actually was a bad idea for them, but it really, for him as pastor, what he was trying to do was he wanted to leave the church because he was going to retire soon. He wanted to leave the church with as little or no debt if possible when he left. The elders and the rest of the leadership team were like, yeah, but we have this note at 3.75%. It doesn't make sense for us to try to. He was trying to get it about him and his timing and not necessarily the organization. So this matters, right? Why now? Why do we need to take these steps now? You need to be able to articulate that. Fourth question, do we have the right people on the team? Any growing church is going to have a measure of leaving some people behind or saying goodbye to some people along the way. However politely or unpolitely you want to say that, that's fine with me. But understanding that not everybody's going to take the journey with you. Okay? And there are some people that are not going to be ready to go into this space. There was an elder, I can't say, hang on. There was an elder at a church that I worked with in the last few years that when we started the process of the capital campaign, he quickly realized he didn't want to give to this and he wasn't in agreement with everything that was going on. He literally, within a matter of weeks, resigned his eldership and left the church quietly because he realized this wasn't for him. And there were reasons why I guess that made sense for him, but also he didn't want to deal with kind of carrying this as a leader and responding in a way of generosity. He didn't want to do that. And not everybody is going to be at that place. And you as a leader, I would hope that at some level you have a sense that you're going to have to say goodbye to some people as you continue to grow. Because not everyone's going to keep going with you along the way. Number 5, what does the church giving data say? Do you understand your data? Do you understand how your people are giving? When I was a young pastor, trying to think how old I was 26 years old. I was on staff at a church as an associate pastor. We were getting ready to jump into a giving campaign similar to what we've talked about. They grabbed a list of the top 25 givers. Now, keep in mind, this is a church where if we had the right 10 people in the room, we probably could have come up with $2 or $3 million at that church. I was in that list of top 25 givers as a young 26-year-old associate pastor with young kids at home, wife not working. Like, how is that possible? Understanding your giving data is going to help you know just how to react in that process. And I think every pastor at some point, when he looks at the data, has however many stages of grief there are, right? You work through those pretty quickly. You're going to be surprised by some of that, but you need to understand what your church giving data says. Can we go back to the slide that we inserted, the 5th one? Can we insert that slide? There's a way to look at this as opportunity. The number of people at the bottom of the box that are attending and giving nothing. I want to encourage you in a couple ways to think about those folks as not the enemy. They're still at your church, right? That church is still my church. I'm still there. And they are not your enemy. There could be all sorts of reasons as why they're not giving. One is perhaps you haven't asked in a way that resonates with them, or they're not informed, or they're just not paying attention. I don't know. Could be lots of reasons. But if all of those folks at the bottom of that box, if all of them gave $500 a year, what would that do to your giving? If half of that group gave $500 a year, what would that do to your church? What kind of ministry would you be able to do? If half of that group stepped into generosity at a level, What would that do to their spiritual development? All of that leads to opportunity. And so when you look at your church giving data, I want to encourage you. You can go too deep into the data. Does anybody watch CNBC? Does anybody do that? In the past, you have. Um, if you watch CNBC, there's stuff sliding this direction, right? And then there's like this headline of the person that they're interviewing. And then over here we've got all these other things that are going on. And I'm not sure, am I supposed to track that line, or am I supposed to go with one of these three boxes? Which data thing am I supposed to? You can go too deep in the data. You can get too far, and then it just becomes noise. And I would say to you, there are some things that I would encourage you to track, and there are some things that probably just aren't really even helpful. Don't go too deep into the data, but you need to know what your data is saying. Question number 6. If I could boil it down to two things of a capital campaign, it's the next two. It's number 6 and number 7. What is this, and what are you asking me to do? If you can't clearly articulate the answer to those two questions, what is this, and what are you asking me to do, you shouldn't go into that meeting, okay? When you meet with your high-capacity givers, and you're going to present vision to them, they should walk away with an understanding of the answer to each of those things. What is this, and what am I being asked to do? That's really as simple as I can make it. Any conversation, any progressive audience that you're going to meet with, what is this, and what are you asking me to do, is essential to you being successful in a capital campaign. If you meet with your staff and their spouses, and you present the vision to them, they should be able to repeat back to you, what is this, and what are you asking me to do? If you meet with your elders who have very different questions than your staff, they should be able to articulate, what is this, and what are you asking me to do? I also think what you ask your staff and your elders to do in that process is a little bit of a different challenge than what you're asking perhaps everybody at the bottom of that box to do in the process. What is this? What are you asking me to do? It's likely that you as a lead pastor, communicator, it is likely that you lean towards either an emotive or a cognitive place in your communication, where you typically are bringing a challenge that is logically thought out, and you're bringing them 3 action steps to take this week, or you're on the emotive side and you're getting everybody pumped up, and you lean into this place of emotion, and everybody is ready to go because of the heartfelt message that they have. If you understand which side you lean on, you'll understand you probably go towards one of those questions a little bit easier than the other. Let me also speak to what is this vision? What are you asking me to do? Application. Here's where we get messed up. If all we do is have vision, what is this? And we just present vision, then your people will come back to you with some sort of sentiment of like, that's awesome. You should totally go do that. You should do that. Go do that, pastor, go do that. And that's all we have is the vision. If you only have the other side of it, where it's, what are you asking me to do? Then we get accused of being the church that only asked for money. All they ever want is my money, because we didn't connect the vision to what that ask is about. You have to have vision and application and bring those two things together. I don't want to say it's 50-50, but you need both to be present in the conversation.